asked to simplify so that the h is no longer in the denominator. So to try to work through this, and again, a lot of it depends on how you simplify it, but if you think about your order of operations, the first order of operation is that you always deal with parentheses. So regardless of how I cut this, I've got to deal with those parentheses. Keep in mind you cannot distribute this 2 here because of the fact that you have a plus sign. So the only option, because you have 2 terms inside, so anytime I have a plus b, 2 terms inside of the parentheses, what I have to do is I have to write out those 2 copies, and it will eventually be a FOIL step. So it's not going to be as simple as distributing. Now, do keep in mind, if you had a times b squared, then you could distribute. But because we have addition inside the parentheses, we cannot distribute. We've got to go through the foiling process. All right, so I will start off by writing out my 2 copies, 1 plus h, 1 plus h, and then minus 1 over h. And then I'll FOIL out those parentheses. So the first 2 multiplied together give us 1. The outer will give us a 1 times h, so just plus h. The inner will give us an h times 1, so just another h, plus the last 2 multiplied together give us h squared minus 1 all over h. All right, so if we then combine our like terms, we see that this positive 1, negative 1 will cross out, they'll go to 0. And we also see that we have a 1h plus another h, so we have 1 apple plus another apple, so we're getting 2 apples or 2 h's from this situation, and then plus h squared over h. All right. Now, do keep in mind, because we have this addition sign, addition is not going to be undone by division. So we can't just cross out this h and leave this h squared alone. So there's 2 options here. What you could do is you could say that I'm going to factor out an h. So if I factor out the GCF of h here, I would have h times 2 plus h over h. Now, at that point, this h is being multiplied by 2 plus h, and that multiplication is going to be undone by division, so you can cross out the h's and say you are left with 2 plus h. Okay? Now, another way that you could proceed from this step is, instead of factoring out the h, you could have decided that you're going to split it up because you have a common denominator. There's 1 term in the denominator, so you could say, okay, I'm going to split this up into 2 separate fractions. So if I did that, I would have 2h over h plus h squared over h. Now, at that point, you could then say that the 2 is being multiplied by h, so that multiplication will be undone by division, and you can cross out these h's and say that it's 2. Over here with this h squared, of course, is h times h over h, so that multiplication will be undone by the division. You can cross out or just subtract exponents and say it's plus h. So either way is fine, whether you factor out after you get to this point, or if you split it up. But somehow you have to realize that both of these terms are going to be impacted and changed when you start to divide by that h. Okay, so again, in summary here, what we did is we FOILed out, removed the parentheses, and then the key step was either factoring out the h or splitting it up when you have this 1 term in the denominator.